be in the flesh, back for her life crusher live. I've missed a couple of weeks, guys. I know that. Just finally getting back in the swing of things, being away, doing all things business, and obviously just trying to manage things all about infinity wellness. So I'm back here tonight and hopefully I can keep it up for the next few weeks. But how is everybody? If you're watching Psych Chrissy live, give me a wave. Even though it doesn't seem like my comments as usual are not coming up, which is really annoying. I might just bring you guys up on my laptop just so I can see whether Psych Chrissy is being asked any questions. Let's bring this up. I think the last time I went live on the Infinity Skin and Body page. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Far too many pages, guys. All right, let's see what's happening here. Of course, Facebook is crapping itself. I can see some guys starting to roll up now, so hopefully if you're making comments, there we go. I can see a comment. It's working. Hey, Amy. Thanks for joining me live tonight. I'm talking about sleep, guys. I'm going to do a 2-part series on sleep. You can never talk about sleep enough, can you? It's one of those things that regardless of how old we are, what we're doing in life, at some stage or another, we encounter problems with sleep. So firstly, tonight I'm going to really focus on some of the causes of that. And then next week I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that you can actually do in the event that you are experiencing a whole heap of sleep disturbance. So, what causes sleep disturbance? I'm going to get into that. Before I do, you'll see a special link on this post tonight. We are kicking off kids yoga and meditation for term 3 next week, I think it is. Geez, those school holidays went very quick to me. Probably not to a lot of mums at home. If you've been braving the school holidays with all your kids in tow, you're probably thinking, Psych Chrissy, don't stop fooling yourself. They've gone pretty slow, or you might have got some holidays, so they've probably gone pretty quickly. So click the link for all of the details. We are taking the little kidlets in next week for intake for all of the new programs that are rolling out for kids yoga and meditation. So if that sounds like something your little biter might enjoy or need, please feel free to click the link there and check out all the details. So sleep, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what creates sleep disturbance. And let's talk about, I'm going to get into sleep disorders tonight, guys. So some very weird and wacky disorders out there that you might be interested in, or you might wonder whether that applies to you or not. But we'll see about that. We'll see what the research was very interesting when I was going through it. I'm like, is that actually a name for a disorder? So stay tuned for some of that interesting research that Psych Chrissy done around sleep disorders. But sleep disturbance can be very, very common, and effectively it can be disturbed in a lot of different ways. But one of the common ways that I probably deal with most in private practice, and a lot of you guys out there are probably going to relate to this, but it's that experience of you go to sleep, and for whatever reason, all the thoughts start happening. You start kind of re-experiencing memories. You start going into the future and worrying about certain things. It's like almost the trigger for mind overdrive happens the minute that you go to get into your bed and go to sleep. And I know with my clients, it's a very, very frustrating occurrence. They're like, Psych Chrissy, why is it every time I go in bed, my head starts playing a 24-piece friggin' band, and why doesn't this happen to me during the day? So overthinking, or in a clinical term, we call it rumination, can often cause lots of problems with sleep. We just can't seem to switch off the thinking patterns. They roll over and over again, and very commonly that can be a real blocker or a barrier for sleep. Because you're overstimulated, you just can't seem to wind down and get yourself in a restful enough state to be able to go off to sleep. So overthinking, guys, it has a lot to answer for. And like I said, this is a 2-part episode. So tonight I'm going to talk about the whys, Next week, I'm going to talk about what the bloody heck you do about it to try and get yourself off to sleep. But I know, guys, overthinking is a common trigger for sleep disturbance. One of the second triggers, and I've actually experienced this one from time to time, believe it or not, is diet. And when I say diet, I mean both food and alcohol can definitely have impacts on our sleep. That's because different types of food, whether it be heavy food, if you eat a whole lot of carbohydrates, MSG and sodium have been found to impact on our sleep, and then also alcohol as well, is we know that some of the ingredients in those, whether it be food or alcohol, can actually get in and disrupt our sleep-wake cycle. So our REM cycle is what is responsible for regulating the sleep patterns. And I won't go too much into the REM cycle, but pretty much in a nutshell, it's about I suppose, the process that occurs throughout our sleeping that allows us to fall into different levels of sleep. Now, when you ingest something like high levels of sodium, maybe even a food that it's quite hard to digest, all of our energy or all of our efforts go into digesting that food, and you don't get the amount of, I suppose, energy and effort that we need or biological process that we need going into the REM cycle that allows us to go into different levels of sleep, because it's being used up in other bodily processes. So food and alcohol definitely can be barriers and blocks to getting a restful sleep. Light. Okay, so I've spoken about this before, whether it be blue light from screens and phones, which is artificial light, or just natural light. Whether you, you have been, overexposed to sunlight, or you haven't had enough, that can really impact. So, for example, in winter, natural light is compromised because we experience sort of a shorter day because the nighttime is longer, so we don't get as much light as we normally do, and that impacts on our melatonin production, which basically melatonin is the hormone that's responsible for regulating the sleep-wake cycle. So if you get an overstimulation of light, so too much screen, too much TV, too much sort of light beaming into our brains, as well as some confusion, so our days are shorter, or for whatever reason our natural light gets disrupted. So for example, when we go overseas, jet lag is often a difficulty that we have in adjusting to the different cycles of time and also light. I know when I travelled to London, not only was it the jet lag that I was battling with in summer, they only get like 4 hours of darkness. So I was waking up because there was light sort of pouring in my window, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's daytime. And it was 4 o'clock in the morning. But because, my body was responding to the light, it was having all kinds of problems recognizing when I should have been asleep. So again, if you're somebody that might have light beaming into your room, not enough darkness, that can definitely confuse your melatonin production, and also impact on your circadian rhythm. So that is the regulatory process that we rely on that tells us when to be awake and when to be asleep. So light definitely plays a role in that. Now let's get into the sleep disorders, guys. So there's all kinds of different sleep disorders, and we treat them in lots of different ways. And as I said, next week we'll really get into the nuts and bolts of how I can even share with you some of the ways that I have successfully treated insomnia in my clinic, and whether you fall into the category of insomnia. I think from memory it's insomnia, and I might be quoting off here, but it's generally it's a prolonged sleep disturbance difficulty, and that is trouble falling asleep, trouble staying asleep, and restless sleep. Let me just double check. When do we qualify insomnia diagnosis? Because I didn't check this up. How long do we have to be sleep disturbed before we get a diagnosis of insomnia, please tell us, Dr. Google. I think it's more than 2 weeks offhand, but I don't want to tell you guys the wrong information. It's not actually giving us a time frame. Can you diagnose yourself? No. How do I know? Sorry guys, just checking this out. What have we got here? So everything that the duration of insomnia is important. Okay, I look at sort of the 2 week sort of indicator, but doctors consider insomnia chronic if it occurs at least 3 nights of the week. Okay, so this is a chronic disorder, so this means very serious. 3 nights of the week for 3 months or longer. So I probably look at some sort of sleep disturbance or sleep disorder going on for any duration longer than 2 weeks, but a chronic disorder is categorized in that way. So if that's been happening for you for over that period of time, you might classify yourself as having some sort of sleep disorder or a type of insomnia at the chronic level if you've got difficulties in that regard. So let's talk about the different types of sleep disorder. So obviously you've got general insomnia. So that is categorized by obviously the duration which you've had your sleep disturbance, but also is classified as the inability to fall asleep or difficulties falling asleep, staying asleep and having restless sleep. So that's kind of the most common form of sleep disturbance that we see. We have adjustment insomnia. Now, this one is mostly related to stress. So if you generally can fall asleep, but you have a period of time where you're having some adjustment going on, there are higher levels of stress, or there's just something different going on in your life that creates sort of a inability to fall asleep, an inability to stay asleep, or a restful sleep, we call that adjustment insomnia. Okay, so it's related to a situational circumstance. Behavioural insomnia of a child, guys. Everybody that is a parent, potentially that has had restless sleepers, might have encountered this. So, but it's mostly related to routine disruptions. So, you know, if your children follow a particular type of routine and you change that, and for whatever reason they can't wind down, or there's a pattern of that behaviour, we call that behavioural insomnia for children. And I'm going to get into some other types as well. So idiopathic insomnia. Now, this can be evident in even in infancy, and it's not really explained by some of the common. So idiopathic insomnia, I must state, goes from infancy and can definitely carry on into adulthood. So these are the people that generally say, I've always just had problems with sleep. Or these are the children or the infants that have been to the sleep schools. You've done all the strategies. You're kind of at the end of your tether, and you just kind of getting to the point where you're like, well, this seems to be an ongoing issue, or I don't really know why. And it's not explained by medical disorders. It's not explained by psychological disorders. It's not explained by any other sleep disorder. But there is a science or some research to suggest that there are troubles with an overactive wakening system or an underactive sleep system. Because as you know, our sleep-wake cycle is very much regulated by hormones, melatonin, there's other hormones that contribute to our circadian rhythm, making sure that it has flow. And we often find in idiopathic insomnia that it's these sleep-wake cycles that just don't seem to be sort of doing what they should be doing to trigger off sleep-wake cycles. And like I said, I'll get into the strategies or what the treatment recommendations are for that next week. But I suppose that's an explanation for people that have always seemed to have had some form of sleep disturbance. Insomnia due to stress or substance ingestion. So substances can be a whole range of things like caffeine, it can be alcohol, it can be food like I mentioned before, and it can also be medications. and not just legal medications, but illegal medications as well, and also illicit substance use can impact on insomnia. Insomnia due to medical reasons. So this is more so related to mental disorder. So we see insomnia arise from different types of mental difficulties or psychiatric disorders. Chronically we can see people with anxiety disorders encounter a lot of sleep disturbance because, as I said before, one of the common causes of sleep disorders can be overthinking and ruminating. So as we know, anxiety clientele, one of the key features of anxiety is just going and over things. So definitely mental health disorders, different forms of schizophrenia can create, a hyperstimulation where they just can't seem to wind down and go to sleep, and they're highly stimulated for long periods of time. Also substance use disorders that might involve stimulants definitely impact on that. So insomnia due to medical disorder is mostly due to mental health disorder. Now this was an interesting one, and I suppose one that I must say that I have encountered in private practice and even in my prison work. It's called paradoxical insomnia. You're probably sitting there going, what the heck is Psych Chrissy talking about? But it's the complaint or the perception of sleep disorder, but it's often not backed up by any evidence. So these are people that say, I haven't slept enough, I'm not getting enough sleep, because of a perception or an underestimation in sleep. Like I've had, clients come to me and they'll say, I just not seem to be getting enough sleep. And then I'll say to them, well, tell me what that looks like. And they'll sort of say, about 7 hours. And I'm like, man, if you're getting 6 hours, I know you might not feel like that's enough, but biologically, you're doing okay. But they persistently present a fatigue because of perception that they're not getting enough sleep, rather than an actual evidence-based experience. So, they're people that are not, someone that might say that they're not getting enough sleep might come up with 3 or 4 hours. That's definitely undersleeping. But these people are more so related to the perception that they're not getting enough sleep. And then finally, this relates to some of the overthinking. This is that I said at the start of the broadcast. There's actually a sleep disorder classification for this. And let me get this right because it is a mouthful, guys. Psychophysiological insomnia. So this is the type of insomnia that is solely related to excessive worrying and racing thoughts. Okay, so it has its whole own category of insomnia, the sense that you go to sleep and all of a sudden the brain fires up. And I've seen some really funny memes relating to this type of insomnia where I saw like me during the day and it's thought, relaxed, and there's pictures of, everybody just enjoying the day, and then me when I try to go to sleep and there's all of these bubbles of like, bands playing and flashbacks of different types of thinking patterns. And, so this is a type of insomnia that is, I suppose, phrased up as psychophysiological insomnia because I suppose there is a cognitive process that is being triggered by the experience of you trying to go to sleep. And unfortunately, a lot of the time for these clients, they've developed a really unhealthy relationship with sleep. So automatically they go to get in bed, their head flares up straight away because there's a reaction of, here I go, I'm not going to be able to go to sleep. And typically with all forms of insomnia, unfortunately, even sleep disorders, there is a developing and an emerging unhelpful relationship that is developed with sleep. That when we treat sleep disorder, and I'm going to get into that next week, or get you to understand things that you need to be aware of, we actually target primarily some of those really unhealthy beliefs about sleep that have formed as a result of some of these types of disorder. And in order to treat the sleep disturbance, we actually have to treat the beliefs, the unhelpful beliefs that have formed formed over time with somebody encountering consistent sleep disturbance. So there we go, guys. In summary, there are lots of things that can impact on sleep disturbance. So we've got overthinking and worrying, we've got diet, whether that be food, alcohol, different types of ingredients in food such as sodium or MSG. We've got light, whether it's an overstimulation or changes to our exposure to light. And then we have a whole range of different sleep disorders, various types of insomnia, whether it be adjustment, generic insomnia. We've got insomnia that's onset in infancy and goes right the way through to adulthood. We have insomnia caused by mental health issues. We have insomnia that is imagined to a certain degree. And then we have psychophysiological insomnia, which is that automatic sort of overthinking, overstimulation, cognitive overstimulation that occurs when trying to go to sleep. So there we go, guys. There's a summary of all the different types of sleep disturbances and challenges that we might encounter and why. And next week, I'm going to talk to you guys about some sleep strategies that if you have related to something that I've said to tonight and you've thought, oh, bugger, I think that might be me, I'm going to get into the strategies next week of how to address some of these common sleep disturbances, some of these sleep disorders. If you're thinking, oh, I think this might be more than just a fleeting issue, I feel like it's more prolonged and more recurrent than that. I'm going to go through some strategies next week on how to manage some of your sleep problems. So there we go, guys. There's Psych Chrissy for another week of Life Crusher Live. I hope that has been helpful and I hope you've got something out of tonight, but I will catch you all next week for part 2, where I share some of my most effective strategies for regulating your sleeping patterns. Thanks, guys. I'll see you all next week.